Welcome back to the Self Trust Solution Podcast. I'm your host, Dawn Lede, the Self Trust Coach. And today I'm joined by Jenn Farrer. Jenn is a certified executive coach, keynote speaker, and author of Make Them Think: How to Coach from Ownership, Insight, and Action. For nearly 20 years, she's worked with leaders, coaches, and high performing professionals on one deceptively difficult skill: asking better questions and listening in a way that actually moves people forward. But what we're diving into today is a very different kind of challenge. After spending years helping others think, decide, and act, Jenn stepped into a season where she had to face something much harder: putting her own thinking, her own voice, and her own work out into the world. Jenn, I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. I really enjoy your show.
Thank you. I'm so excited for myself and for the listeners to all really hear about these shifts, because you are someone who makes such a big impact out in the world with leaders, and your experience of that. Sometimes we can automatically just believe that it must come easily to you, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, I believed it myself for a while. I was like, a coach, certainly I can, manage to do these hard things and on my own, right?
Yeah. So before this shift, you had built a career helping others think, decide, and grow, like we just said. But take us into that season of what your work looked like and how you saw yourself.
Sure. I had taken a step back from my work as an executive coach and corporate trainer for what I intended to be a 6-month creative sabbatical. So
Mm.
I intended to take everything I had learned from working with business leaders and athletes and put it out there and in lots of different products, for lack of a better term, right? For teaching people how to have better coaching conversations with others and also how to have better conversations with themselves. So I intended, as I said, for that to be 6 months. Almost 3 years in, I was sitting with every permutation that one idea could take about 10% of the way done in my notes app. So I had really nothing to show for my creative sabbatical. I had a couple book outlines, I had a bunch of business ideas, I had a podcast idea, an online course idea, but I hadn't actually created anything. I had been doing a lot of thinking about it, right? And it really started to erode my sense of self and like how I was relating to myself because I thought, while it's good that I've had this time to think and I've gotten everything out of my head and onto paper, I haven't gotten one thing over the finish line.
What was
And
happening during that time, do you think, that was preventing those from being completed?
well, I didn't recognize it as such at the time. I think in
Mhm.
hindsight, I can talk to you about it and say, like, oh, I was scared. I think taking, my whole career, I made space for other people's thinking and helped them have breakthroughs. But then when it came to actually putting down, saying, like, stake in the ground, I've been doing this almost 20 years. Here's how I think about it. Here's what I believe, and here's how I do it. Putting that down on paper and out in the world, it just felt incredibly vulnerable and exposing. I started having dreams about, uh, um, being naked at school, being naked on stage, being naked at work. I mean, I really think it was that vulnerability
I
of
love
having
you
it out
bring that
there.
up, because you said getting it out on paper and getting it out on the world. And my instinct is to ask which was it. But I think that it's good for us to hear that sometimes even getting it out on paper, it's, even though the getting it out in the world is the vulnerable part that we're talking about, we can go one step forward and even prevent ourselves from getting it fully out on paper. So what would we have noticed from the outside? We're just watching you. We know a little bit. We have a little sneak peek of what's happening internally. What would we have noticed externally during that time?
I have been a very successful
Right.
entrepreneur and successful coach, and I'm an athlete. I I'm a runner, an endurance runner.
Mhm.
So I think most people, even close to me, will be surprised to even learn that I'm very much on a self-trust journey. The book just came out at the end of January. So and it wasn't like I developed self-trust and then wrote the book. I started to learn about my own self-trust through the process of writing. But I think people would be surprised to even know that I doubted my thinking enough, to feel vulnerable about putting it out there.
Yeah. It's so good to share that because so often we think that it's just this external view, and people who are successful and strong also have doubt. And we can present differently externally, and we can feel. So what was that experience for you? Kind of having that dissonance of the external viewpoint versus what's going on in.
Well, like I said, I think I didn't know I had a problem.
What did you think? Like, what
Yep.
I really love to hear that. What did you think was
Yeah.
happening? Yeah.
I think that I was just really I was keeping some promises to myself, but I was sacrificing other promises to myself, right? So here's what I mean by that. I would tell myself that I needed to, I'm a mom, I'm a wife. I had taken back some client load back on. So I would tell myself, well, I need to do this client thing. I need to prepare for this. I need to, it's all of these other things that were external, family related, career related, or I'm training for this race. That's going to take a lot of time. Right. But so I was upholding a lot of the obligations that I had in the external world, but here I had this kind of internal desire to express myself creatively in any number of these different ways, and I wasn't doing that. So,
Sort of like responsibility is what it felt like to you internally. Like, I'm being responsible.
yeah,
Handling this client load, I'm handling my family, my running, but there's this thing that's being unanswered, this desire.
I think it was like I was showing up for everybody else, and this was a big way that I was not showing up for myself, and I didn't I don't think I could have, like, pinpointed that at the time, right? I mean, that's when we're sort of subject to all of these things, it's hard to look at them objectively. Now with some distance and talking to you, I'm like, "Oh, yeah, that was what was going on with me," but I definitely didn't recognize it as such at the time.
So you've done some objectively hard things. You
Yes.
survived a stroke, you pushed yourself physically, but you mentioned that this felt harder. Tell us what made putting your ideas out there feel so different.
Yeah, it was terrifying, and yeah, I definitely think of myself as someone who does hard things, can do hard things. I mean, as a runner, you, like, sort of intentionally put yourself in discomfort regularly, daily. But I think part of it was the first time I was not practiced in taking up space, right? It was the first time I was really not focused on someone else. I mean, I think it's interesting. I notice a lot of the people on your show, a lot of us are in helping professions. We're coaches, we're counselors, and or mentors of different kinds. And I was really, really well practiced at making space for other people and helping them sort through their own thinking and asking great questions and being a great listener. But then when it came to, like, sitting down with myself, even, like, sorting through my own thinking, it was not something I had spent a lot of time doing. So it felt very new. It felt, we get a lot of praise and self-worth as we grow up by serving others. And that's something that, I had really attached strongly onto that, like, part of my purpose was being more behind the scenes and like helping others soar. Right. And to put my own point of view out there where it's like open for comment and other people's like opinions about it, and where it was, people could look at what I said and be like, oh, that's the wrong way to do it. I was just like really like tied up in knots about kind of other people's reaction to what I put out there, even though it was something that I know intimately how to do this. I have more certifications and like degrees and training in this.
What do you
Uh,
think was really at stake? Like, what do you think all of that I like to think of what it's offering you as evidence. That's evidence of fear. What do you think the fear really thought was at stake?
I think that the real fear was someone thinking I was a hack. It's
Yeah.
like I had built a really successful coaching business. I've been a leader of other coaching companies. And it really was that feeling of like, okay, but if I give them a glimpse into my head and how I think about coaching, then what if it's exposed that I actually am not a very good coach?
Mm.
Which is one of those things that, and we all do this. It's like that's kind of an irrational idea. Like if people have been hiring me as a coach for years and years and years. Um, but I think that was what was at stake, is that I would feel, it was tied into my own feelings of worth.
So good to recognize, right? Because even if someone were to say that, it doesn't make
True.
it doesn't erase all the humans you've helped, all the people that you will help in the future.
Absolutely. I know. I do think that's so funny. I say in the book, sometimes breakthroughs feel like an aha. Most of the time, though, they feel like, oh, crap. Oh, man. I didn't know I was thinking that or feeling that. But I think when you get to that level of the like, oh, crap, that is usually where change can happen.
Crap thoughts, I mean, they're always gonna be there. Our
Right.
our invitation is to relate to them differently. It's like, "Oh, there's that oh crap thought. What do I wanna do with it? Do I wanna
Yes.
engage with it? Do I wanna let it just slide by? Do I wanna ask some questions? Do I wanna give it perspective?" So different than when we're just like, "Oh crap," and then we just let it land like a big pile of
Oh, yeah.
sludge, right?
Yeah, it was the whole thing about like you can be subject to it or you can look at it from distance so that you can look at it with some objectivity and curiosity.
Yeah. I love that you said, I'm going from this space of always holding other people and their thoughts and helping them and, impacting them and serving them to this sharing what I think and what I believe as if those are two different things.
I know.
It's so good because our brain is actually reminding you these are the same thing, but because there's a little fear there, we can hear it as if it's opposing that in some sort of way. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. And I think that's one of the most like beautiful and frustrating aspects of being human. Um, is that we are full of contradictions. We often think two things that could be interpreted completely differently about the same thing, same situation kind of all the time, right?
Oh, sure. You say
Um,
the same statement
oh
with
yeah.
just different inflection, and it takes on a whole different meaning for you. That's why, often I'll invite clients to say the same words, but in a British accent or in
Yeah,
a
yeah.
robot voice with no tone, because our inner dialogue, I like to remind people, doesn't have a tone inherently. We have to
No.
assign one, and so when we have just one for so long, then it makes sense that we hear it that way. But if we just remove the tone, we can be a little more objective with it and relate different.
But I love that. I mean, I love even like hearing you reflect back to me my own thinking, right? And how 'Cause what I was saying was, this is my brain, right? I was saying, on one hand, my value in the world is by helping people help themselves, and I do that one-on-one very well. But on the other hand, if I were to put one of these products out there and help people help themselves, and I do it on a mass scale, whoa, that's terrifying. And you're like, "That really doesn't make much sense now, does it?"
It's just reminding yourself, it really each one of those people, it's one to one for them. They
Right.
don't feel like they're part of the mass.
Mhm.
So you're still doing that one-on-one work. You're just doing it through a different format.
Medium, yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned a turning point that in Mexico City where you hear something that changes everything for you. Can you take us to that moment?
Yes. I live in New York, and I was down in Mexico City for a meditation training. So I've been meditating for decades, but I never had any, like, real training in any one tradition, and so I was in Mexico City learning, how to practice Vedic meditation, so in the Vedic tradition. And in the Vedic tradition, you sit twice a day for 20 minutes, and it's just a mantra, right? So it's a sound that kind of wafts in and out of your consciousness. And I remember raising my hand and asking the meditation teacher, I said, okay, if I'm sitting in meditation and I get an insight or a creative idea or like a sudden dose of inspiration, is it okay to stand up and write it down so I don't forget it? And he kind of was like, he said yes. And he said he used to do that in the beginning too. And then he said, but what you'll find is that the same ideas keep coming back to you. And you don't need to write them down because they're not going to leave you alone until you do something with them. And he used the phrase, you have to clear your creative backlog before you have new ideas. And I was like, I know exactly what he's talking about. I was like, okay, so I've had these ideas for different formats of basically sharing the same thing, right? How to have better conversations. In a coaching context with yourself and others. And I'm like, I have done nothing with that. And every new idea I have is some version of that. And so for me, the idea of clearing my creative backlog was a turning point because I really felt like, and it's not as if I all of a sudden heard that and like developed self trust, right? And then wrote the book. I think that moment made me tired of my own BS. And so I then put the structures in place in order to write the book and learned self trust in the process of writing.
I would say you unveiled it, that it was already there because you were already exercising that. I think of when you say that thing about the backlog, it's so true, but the urgency to move is actually a scarcity tactic, right? It's when we think we can't hold on to it or it's not really ours, so we have to hurry up and go write it down or we have to act on it right now. And it was always there. It was gonna keep coming back because it's what you're meant to do.
Yes.
So it was just giving yourself permission to see that. I love that so much because here's another thing that woke up for me, and maybe I'm gonna say it because maybe it will ring true for someone else as well. What else comes forward is if I don't just get up and write it down, maybe there's more to it. Maybe it goes deeper. Maybe there's more for
Uh-huh.
me to learn
Yeah.
that if I rush and get up, I missed out on. I mean, it will come back, of course, but maybe there's this beautiful evolution of it, like the
Mhm.
blooming of it, if you will, is what comes to mind.
Mhm.
Uh,
Well, I love the way you
yeah.
tied it back to purpose. I think that's so true. And a lot of times with coaching clients, I sort of will be like not that interested in their healthy habits, right? A lot of people
Mm,
have, they meditate and they journal and they exercise and they eat well. but then they'll be in a job or a relationship or situation that they're totally miserable in. And it's like, well, you have been getting this whisper, like you're here talking to me because you have this whisper, this inkling of something that is going to guide you closer to your purpose and you're not acting on it. Right. And so I'm almost like, so I'm not impressed with how much you meditated, right?
Right?
But, but I'm
Habits
so
can habits can become their own kind of prisons or
yeah,
shackles sometimes.
excuses. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you decide to write. I mean, you've made the decision, but now you're like, okay, not only have I decided it's time,
Yeah.
you set a 12-week timeline.
I did.
And you didn't just set a timeline, you made it public.
Yeah, I did. Well, like I said, I mean, I think it was one of these inflection moments, right? I got really tired of my own BS and I needed to cuz when I think about okay, what works in coaching conversations with others, it is how do you help them take ownership over the solution because when people feel ownership, then they so I sort of flipped that question back to my on myself and I was like, okay, well what would actually make me feel like taking ownership and actually moving on this. And so I really thought of it like almost like a training plan for a marathon where gave myself 12 weeks. I hired a coach. I actually went back to the meditation teacher who is also Light Watkins is his name. He's self-published several books and talked to him about coaching me. And we set like weekly milestones, daily milestones. And I did. I went out on social media and I was like, I'm writing a book and it's coming out on January 27th, which at the time was just me looking at the calendar and being like, yeah, 12 weeks from Tuesday is January 27th. That's the publication date. And then just like keeping to those, I think once it was out there, it was public, once I had a plan I just executed on the plan. I just showed up every single day and did my task for that day, and I think that, the structure I hesitate to use the word accountability in coaching because I think sometimes accountability can it almost triggers a defensive response that can actually shut down our creative thinking, but I think that the structure helped me have public accountability, helped me take ownership over it, and during that season, so the book came out January 27th. So I started writing it like beginning of November. So we had Thanksgiving in there, Christmas. We had my family celebrated Hanukkah as well. We had all the school breaks. I totaled my car during that time. My 10-year-old was homesick with the flu for a week. So like w- life just like kept going and tried to throw me off track of the plan in every possible different way, but I just really kept going. I mean, I wrote in the airport lounge, I wrote on vacation, I wrote every day except for I took Christmas Day off, but I wrote Christmas Eve, and I just got it done.
Yeah. You said something really powerful that this built self-trust in a way that all of your previous accomplishments never had. Why do you think that is?
I think part of it was going through like the discovery process of even realizing that a lack of self-trust was there or realizing that the fear and the vulnerability were even there, right? Like as we talked about earlier, I was telling myself the story of being responsible by like keeping up with all these other obligations. Well, then once the once the book was written, there was this period of a couple of weeks between the time that it's, like, done and out. And I had early readers, and these were, like I had maybe 20 or 30. These are all very close friends, close colleagues, former clients, current clients, like, these are all trusted people. And the second I hit send on the email with the manuscript, it was like terror. And I think that was when I really was like, "Oh, that's the thing. This, like, fear and vulnerability is really the thing that kept me from writing." And by by not keeping the promise to myself that said years ago at the beginning of this creative sabbatical that I was going to put my perspective out there, and it ended up being a book, but I had different ideas of what that would look like. I mean, I was in essence like really not showing up for myself. I was not keeping promises to myself. And so I think discovering that kind of what was holding me back and then discovering the antidote through the process of writing it, which for me was like, okay, if I say I'm going to do something, I have to uphold my promises to myself with the same way as I would to a client or a loved one. That process was really showing me, okay, this is how building self trust will look in all areas of life, right?
Mhm. How has your definition of self-trust changed through this?
Well, it's funny. I think I told you this before we started recording. When I was first starting as an executive coach, like my most popular corporate training and keynote was conquering self doubt or overcoming self doubt to be a more effective leader, right? And what I taught in that and what I was doing with my executive coaching clients amounted to I got into coaching kind of I grew up through the social sciences, right? Psychology and communication theory and neuroscience. And so I would come into these keynotes and come into these client sessions armed with so much data. And of course, in an executive coaching context, that would be like 360 feedback. So, feedback from colleagues, right? And I would say, these are all the things that people appreciate about you. And if you could internalize what these other people think about you, then that's going to unlock all the ways in which you feel limited about your self-worth or worthiness, or, it'll cure your imposter syndrome. So I was very much taking an outside in, data driven perspective. And then I think I still think that there's a lot of value in, but of course it's very limited too, right? I mean, circumstances change, people around you change. And so what I learned about myself that has now, like through this kind of journey, is it really is about like how I'm relating to myself and how I think about myself. And it's much more in here than out there.
Mm.
And also more intuitive. I mean, there's certainly a space for data and it's really important, but there's a yin and yang between like how other people feel about me, how I feel about me, what the external data is telling me and what my intuition is telling me, and just learning to keep those things in the right balance. Um, and so the shift, I think, for me was very much one of looking out there
Yes.
to now looking in here.
Yeah. Yeah. Because out there, it's just a rocky foundation. You have to
Right.
have the firm internal foundation. When we are looking, if people think this about me, then I start shaping myself around that. Then when someone doesn't, then I don't know what to do with it, or I have to change myself instead of just adjusting behaviors. Very different. If you
Right.
have that firm foundation of this is who I am, this is what I value, and you have a decision of firm self-trust, then the feedback does become data.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It doesn't shift your identity. It gives you like, oh, maybe I do want to approach this differently, or I want to communicate differently in my work, or I want to learn this different skill. It becomes data instead of a verdict on yourself as a kid.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it
Yeah.
just gives you, I think, a more well-rounded understanding of like what you know to be true about yourself.
Uh, yeah, and where you want to evolve and grow, we always are. It's a beautiful thing. We seek that. We seek evolution and change and growth while we also seek comfort and safety and try to avoid, discomfort and energy. So we have those two sides, and there's a way that we can, I call it the unified front, but there's a way to do that for sure. But it means relating to yourself differently. to your
Right.
point. So for someone listening who knows they're sitting on something, an idea, a project, a next step, what's the first promise they should make to themselves?
Well, I would say, I guess I would encourage them to just look at themselves and hold themselves to the same standard as they would hold somebody else when it comes to promises, right? So maybe the first promise is like, okay, I'm going to be really honest with myself about how I keep promises to myself. For most of us, it's like we all have that flaky friend, We all have a flaky friend who's always running late, or you made plans and it's a 50-50 shot whether they're gonna show up. And over time you start to like relate to that person as not being very trustworthy. And I think when we don't keep promises to ourselves, that's chipping away at the way we relate to ourselves at some level. And so I think just being really honest about, okay, do I uphold the commitments I make to myself in the same way that I uphold the commitments I make to other people?
Mm. So tell us now, what are you focused on? Like, what's the work you're most excited about right now?
Yeah, well, I've had the best time with this book, which is so funny. We've been talking about like how much hesitation I had for so many years, and now I'm like, it's the best thing I've ever done. That's
Right.
how it happens, right? So right now I am doing a lot of teaching within organizations. So either they're like coaching accreditation organizations or within companies, and they're bringing me in to teach their managers how to have better coaching conversations. So that all that work that's taking the framework that I eventually got down on paper and out into the world that is now in the book, Make Them Think, taking that framework out and then teaching people how to apply it in their lives, right? With the people whose lives they want to impact. So that work is really lighting me up. And I also am still doing some one-on-one coaching work, but it's starting to evolve a little bit more into coaching coaches and helping to apply the practices in the book into their work.
So where can people connect with you and learn more about
Sure. So the book is available. It's called Make Them Think: How to Coach for Ownership, Insight, and Action. And that's available on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com. I also am very active on LinkedIn at Jenn Farrer, Farrer. I have a weekly newsletter there where I talk about just reflections on thinking and leadership and how to have more meaningful conversations. And I also am active on Instagram and TikTok at Jenn Farrer.
them? And this conversation is such a powerful reminder that even those of us who spend our lives helping others grow still have to walk through that process ourselves.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
yeah, thank you so much for being here and sharing this.
Thanks for having me.
If today's conversation stirred something in you, I want you to take one step before you close this episode. Go take the self trust identity map. Before strategy, before motivation, before effort, you need to know where your identity is operating from because that is what determines everything that follows. It's free, it takes 3 minutes, and it will give you a precise read on where you're operating from right now and exactly where to focus next. So the link is in the show notes along with all of Jen's links. Go check that out. And if you're a coach or expert who already knows what's in the way, if you're done operating from almost and ready to claim the authority that actually moves your business forward, claimed as my private coaching container for exactly that. That link is in the show notes too. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what's coming. These stories are just getting started. I'll see you next